Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 538. This program is dedicated to Ari Halberstam, Hashem Yinkum Damai, 31 years ago, gunned down by a terrorist simply because he was Jewish, a chassid of the Rebbe, who was actually visiting the Rebbe, part of the entourage visiting the Rebbe, then in the hospital. May his mother, Dvorah, and family always be comforted. May only hear good news. So here we are in the last week of the month of Adar, when we're told Mishan Nichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha, to increase in joy, and the increase is like MyLife Chassidus, constantly growing. So obviously, as we get closer to the end of the month, has to be the greatest amount of joy, and that's already understood from the Megillah when we say Achedesh Asher Nepach Lehem, the month that was transformed. And the effect of Purim was not just on Purim; it was also after Purim, obviously. And the mere fact that we are here today, after all we've gone through, to the Gzeira of Haman and all the other Gzeiras, is alone good reason to celebrate. At the same time, month of Adar, this does not mean we don't have any challenges. I just mentioned a tragic event that happened in the month of Adar, 31 years ago. Being a chassid of the Rabbis, so let's talk about another event that's not a positive one, at least not until we can see and reveal the deeper meaning behind it. Chof Zayin Adar. This week will also be the 27th of Adar, 33 years ago. In the year 1992, Tov Shinun Beis, the Rebbe suffered a stroke. So let's talk about that. What lessons do we learn from this sad day? Now it's important to emphasize that by Yidden, we don't just remember the revealed celebratory days, we also remember the sad days, because we understand that it's all part of a larger picture, a cycle. Not that we can explain why these things happen, but there's always lessons to be learned. There's always strength to be gathered. So the first thing we have to know is that even though Chof Zayin Adar, and I remember it very clearly, it was a Monday night, a dark Monday night, I should say. The Rebbe was at the oil, and it was pretty late. I remember someone came into my office and said, "What do you think is happening?" It seemed like it was a little late. I didn't have a good vibe. And then indeed we found out slowly. And of course, everything changed after that. There were no more Farbrengens. There was no more seeing the Rebbe in full glory. It was a hell of a Hester, Bekitzer. In some, it was a dark time. And it would be another 2 years and several months until Gimel Tammuz. For me, it had personal impact as well. Besides, of course, the Rebbe was also my work. Everything orbited around the Rebbe's Farbrengens, and it all stopped on that Monday evening, 33 years ago. Chof Zayin Adar. And yet, we never lie down and die, God forbid. We look at something, we may not understand it, we can be devastated by it, but we gather strength. As the Jewish people were oppressed, they, direct proportion to that, they thrived, they blossomed, they flourished. And that is our story. So I remember then, just on a personal note again, we immediately, not the first day, it took a few days to get our thoughts together, decided to continue, obviously, all the work we can do. We couldn't write Farbrengens, the Rebbe was not speaking. But we started taking material from previous years. We launched a new project called The Week Ahead. We had the Week in Review, this was the Week Ahead, and other things. And it was indeed the book Toward a Meaningful Life that I wrote that came out of Chof Zayin Adar. I'll share about that in a moment. That's what we were taught. that every setback and every concealment has to lead to a greater revelation, to greater strength. So now, even though it's a long time, 33 years since then, we are responsible to continue the Rebbe's legacy, the teachings that are eternal, that are relevant today as then, if not more so. A world that is in need of it. So the work is cut out for us. And that's what our focus has to be. So in case anybody does have a pang, has some pain from this, pain has to be transformed and directed and harnessed toward growth. That is what the Rebbe taught us. That's how the Rebbe behaved, and that's how we have to behave. So that's the number one lesson we learn from that. So one asks, did the Rebbe say anything prior to this day, preparing us for events to come? Were the things the Rebbe said in the weeks and days leading up to Chof Zayin Adar that alluded to the Rebbe preparing us that a terrible illness would happen to him? Well, indeed, yes. Around 6 weeks before Chof Zayin Adar, it was Gimel Shvat. And the Rebbe he gave a talk. In those days, the Rebbe would speak. Many talks, sub Shabbos, were from the bima, from after davening, Ma'ariv. The Rebbe would speak from the place where he davened, with a microphone. So it was Gimel Shvat. The Sikha then became part of edited Farbrengen that is now printed in Sefer HaSichas, Tavshin Nun Beis. In this Sikha, the Rebbe spoke about a Rebbe having a stroke. At the time, it was very strange, to be honest, because it wasn't just in passing. The Rebbe spoke relatively a while about it. Spoke about his father-in-law. Without going into all the details, and you can look it up, he spoke about a stroke. Spoke about the doctor asking the Frierdiker Rebbe, why would God strike him of all places in the two places that he used to connect his chassidim, his mouth, speaking, and his right hand, writing. And both were affected. And the Frierdiker Rebbe did not answer at the time, but the Rebbe went on to explain, not to give a reason why God did it, but to say that, and he quoted a Zohar talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu also had a speech issue. 3 different places it says Kvad Peh, Kvad Loshen, a difficult mouth, a difficult language. For him was difficult. Aral Sfasayim, his lips were pursed, his lips were sealed. Loi ish dvarim anechi, I'm not a man of words. And this was actually one of the reasons he gave to God for not wanting to accept to lead the people, because he can't speak to Parah. He couldn't speak. And that's when Hashem said, Mi sampel Adam, who gives a man a mouth to speak? It's I. I will speak through you. And then brought the Zohar that says that the Golos hoye bedibur. Hadibur hoye begolos, I'm sorry. So just like Golos Mitzrayim, the Jews were in Golos. The Dibur, Malchus, the Dibur of Moshe was also in Golos. It says later by Matan Torah he was healed. But the question is asked, why? So the Alter Rebbe explains in Torah, as the Rebbe cites, based on another question, why Moshe's name is Moshe. That's not the name Amram and Yocheved gave to him. And the answer is, Minamayim mishisihu. Bas Pareh said, from water I drew out. But what's the significance of being drawn out of water? Because water is Alma Diskasi, the world of thought, Machshava, not the world of Dibur. Dibur is Yabosha, land. So Moshe came from the world of thought, higher than the world of Dibur. And that's what the Eibishter wanted, someone to bridge the world of Machshava and the world of Dibur. So Moshe would become the Medaber, and Elo Dvorim Asher Dibur Moshe, this man of Loi Dvorim Anechi, Loi Ish Dvorim Anechi, is the one that produced the whole El Hadvorim and all the Divrei Torah. That till this day we learn probably words that nobody has repeated and studied and pored over and analyzed more than Moshe's words. Because it's Misam Pel Adam, it's God's words, traveling through his mouth. And the Rebbe concluded at the end that when a Rebbe has a stroke, his Talmidim, his Chassidim, who listened to him, who heard him, have to become Aaron Achichi Yeh L'chol Lepeh. Like Aaron became Moshe's mouthpiece, we have to become the Rebbe's mouthpiece. That's what the Rebbe said. At the time, as I said, nobody understood. 6 weeks later, unfortunately, This had a profound impact, if I may say, on myself. That's what I did. That was my work. I did that for over 15, 17 years. Trying to be a mouthpiece, a chayzer, repeating the Rebbe's words, and then writing them down and documenting them for posterity. So it became clear that's my shlichus. The Rebbe said it. But not just myself, all of us. Now, we don't know the Rebbe's cheshbonus and so on, but he did say it 6 weeks before Chof Zayin Adar. So this is a directive. I wrote about it in my introduction to Torah Meaning for Life. So what better way to write a book, to teach? Until this day, this is what I do. But there's a lesson for all of us. That we have to be the mouthpieces of the Chassidus, of the Torah, of the directives that the Rebbe shared to everyone we can reach. So the lesson of Chof Zayin Adar is very, very clear. Again, this doesn't minimize or take away from the pain and the questions, but it gives us direction. We have direction. Now, why this happens the month of Adar, a month where it's Marb B'Simcha. These are the questions we cannot fully answer. But we have to do what we can to take these days and turn them into, harness them into tremendous forces of good and transformation. Okay. So with that, let us go into a few other things that are connected to this week, namely Parsha Pekudei, Parsha Shabbos Chazak. We're finishing the second book of the Torah, Sefer Shmos. We'll also talk about the Parshas HaChodesh, which is this coming Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Nissan and Pesach. And before that, we'll also speak about, yesterday was Parshas Parah and the Adar Parshios. And then there's a whole bunch of other questions that came in that we'll try to address. I have follow-ups. All depends on how much time we will have. And please, good opportunity now, encourage you to submit your questions. This is a forum that has become known for one, nothing is taboo. Nothing is off limits. You could ask any question, any controversial question, any provocative question. The only thing is I cannot assure you that I'm going to cover it every week because there are questions coming in faster than I can answer. But we record them all. We have them all completely anonymous and confidential, unless you want to add your name or email because you want a response. But rest assured, we have no access, so you could ask anything you wish. And I must say that, thank God, we're already in the 12th year of this program. We're at episode 538. And from the little that I've been shared, that people have shared with me, this program has had a tremendous impact on individuals, both in addressing their questions and also opening up the ability, the platform, the opportunity to be able to ask. Issues around marriage, issues parents and children, very personal, intimate issues. So I feel honored to be able to be part of the growth and part of the ultimate goal, which is to bridge Torah and Chassidus and apply it to our lives, our personal, psychological, emotional, spiritual lives. So with that, let us go to Parsha Pekudei. Which this year, Vayakha Pekudei, 2 separate Parshas. So Pekudei, of course, is the last Parsha in Sefer Shmos, which really sums up the last few Parshas from Truma, the building of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary, of the tabernacle, and then it's first the command to build the Mishkan, then the actual building of it, and now finally the conclusion of Moshe giving an accounting, El Pekudei HaMishkan, an accounting of all the details of everything that was dedicated and donated. And then the actual erection of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Mishkan, which was on Rosh Chodesh Nissan. And the Parsha concludes exactly with that, how the Shechina, the cloud, Anani Yaakov, rested on the Mishkan, which was a sign that the Shechina was resting, and that's when the Mishkan was erected and stood. And later we'd learn, and then begins Sefer Vayikra, which is all the halachas that were told on those days, Rosh Chodesh Nissan, followed by including the dedication of the Mishkan and all the halachas, until the middle of Parsha Ba'aleischa, which their journey continues, that the cloud rises. Vayala onon Chof, and the Jews continue to start their journey in the 42 journeys, among the 42 journeys in the Midbar, till they get to the Promised Land, to Eretz Yisrael. So if you want the chronology of events, Parsha Pekudei is the conclusion of a series of events of this Sefer, which is Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah, the building of the Mishkan. And then comes a whole Sefer and a little more, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Nosei, till the middle of Ba'aleischa. That's all talking about that period in time, Rosh Chodesh Nissan, when the Mishkan was established. And then the journey continues as they go in Masoyis, from Parsha Ba'aleischa and on, all the way to Parsha Maseh, which is the end of the journeys when they arrive at the east bank of the River Jordan. And then Il Advarim, the fifth Sefer, is Moshe reviews right by the River Jordan, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, that 40th year, coming to the River Jordan, where Moshe reviews the next 27 days, would be 37 days, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat till Zayin Adar, when Moshe's Histalkus, the end of Chumash. So there you have a structure. So interestingly, from the end of Parsha Pekudei is a good section of the Torah, all happening in the same period of time, which is the only place in Torah you have that. So what is the central theme of this week's Torah portion chapter? And of course the lessons that we'll learn. So first, the central theme is clearly the culmination of the building of the Mishkan, the accountability that Moshe Rabbeinu gave. So the first lesson we have is, that's what we each of us have to be doing. We build a Mikdash, Shechanti b'seicham, as the Shalah explains, b'seich kol echad v'achas, a Mishkan within our hearts and souls for Hashem. And what do you build it from? From materials, physical materials of this world. But Pekudei tells us, Eila Pekudei, that we have to give an accounting. Every detail has to be accounted for. Which is, of course, the concept of cheshbon hanefesh, the idea of accountability. What was donated? How was it used? So I remember in Tov Mem Daled, 1984, we at that period in time, we had just began receiving our first donations in an organization. It's called Vadanach Satmim. Organization dedicated to publishing the Rebbe's words. So until that point, there were small donations, so we did it through other organizations. But then it became already something serious. We were buying computers. So the Rebbe told us to incorporate, which we did. And then he said, Kiyadua, I think he said the words, that every message should have a Vad Kaspi, which means a committee, a financial committee, Va'alehem, and above them a Vad Bekedus, an auditing committee, someone who watches over the fight and makes sure that everything is accurate. And the Rebbe wrote, but as I will speak, B'lineder b'Shabbos Kedush Haba, Parsha Pekudei Tov Mem Daled. And the Rebbe indeed spoke about it, why Moshe had to give an accounting. Moshe was a Roya Neman, he was a completely trustworthy man, a man of God. So why did he have to give an accounting? And the Rebbe said two reasons. One is, it's not his money. He took the money from the tzibur, from the public, so he has to give them an accounting. How was it used? And secondly, the Rebbe said, when it comes to money, you have to, even on Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to always be careful. Every penny has to be accounted for. And the Rebbe repeated what he wrote to us, that organizations need to have these two committees. They're not the same committee. Financial committee and auditing committee, meaning those that watch. Pekudei means that audit or review and oversee the finances. So first lesson is for all the mezuzahs and for everybody to be accountable. And we all understand the value of accountability. Not everybody likes accountability. You make mistakes, and in general, why answer to anyone? But that's how it's meant to be. You see, start from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So that's one balabatish, if you wish, practical lesson. But it goes deeper than that. And the Eibishter blesses you with gifts, whether it's financial, whether it's skills, whether it's other gifts and resources that we're blessed with. Everything has to be used to the fullest. And you have to be accountable for that. It's a gift given to you. And if you don't use it, I remember the Rebbe a number of times was like visibly upset. Says the Eibishter gives you something and you don't use it, you're mevalbel kol seder ishtalshus. You're upsetting the whole scheme of things. It's like a choreography. And you were given a certain job. You don't do it, it affects all the other people involved. So Eile Pekudei Mishkan also teaches us the accountability, to understanding the importance, obligation, and of course also gift, responsibility to be accountable for your work, for your actions, for all your activity. Are you building a Mishkan? Are you using all your resources to build a Mishkan? And how are you using them? Are they being used to the fullest, in the best possible manner? So these are very basic lessons and tremendous lessons in life. And of course, the very erection and very establishment of the Mishkan, and with Hashem, the cloud resting, is that when you do all that, you make the keli below, Hashem comes and is present in your life. And you have those blessings that help you grow and help you be a Mishkan, help you sanctify your life, your home, the life of your family, the life of your community, and turn it indeed into a Migdash Ma'at, a Mishkan Hashem, a divine home. What personal and global lessons does it offer us for our time? So we spoke about personal lessons. Global lessons? Well, the ultimate goal is to build a Mishkan, a Direlei Baruch, like I said, of the entire world. Not just in our own Dalet Amas, not just in our own environment. The whole world should be that. We live in a world today that sure needs direction and guidance. So the lesson is very clear. And the relevance is very clear. And accountability is a big part of it. People are not accountable, they only answer to themselves. We all know where we go with that. So being accountable and answering to a higher authority, answering to someone that can call you out on it. So you really feel responsible and you feel obligated to live up to what you're supposed to be achieving in your life. Why was a cloud descending on the Mishkan a sign of the Shechina's presence? How does a cloud passing by over the Mishkan signify that the Shechina has begun dwelling in the Mishkan? Well, this is in general a question about the clouds, Anani HaKoved. They were considered Hashem's clouds, that he protected the Yidden with as they traveled through the Midbar. There were the clouds in front and the back. There was a cloud of Eish, of fire. There's a cloud of light, and different types of clouds. So, in general, everything in Gashmis evolves from the Ruchnis. When you look at a cloud, what do you see? You see there's something ethereal about it. It hovers. It's not quite tangible, but it's there. So you find Onon in a number of places. You find it also by Matan Torah, the Oshan, the Har Sinai Oshan. But the idea of cloud, you find Onon Hakteris, the cloud of the incense in the Mishkan Beis Hamikdash. So cloud in Gashmis represents a Shechina's presence. We also know by Sukkot Teishvu Shivas Yomim. What's Sukkot? So there's two interpretations. Actual Sukkot, they built little shacks, little dwelling places, but also Sukkot also refers to Anani HaKoved. And the Schach represents that as well. So it's a form of a makif in the language of Chassidus, a makif that surrounds and encompasses us. And that's the symbol of Hashem's presence. And when the cloud would rise, that was a sign. Now they should disassemble the Mishkan and began the journeys as they traveled throughout the wilderness. Okay, but there was also the cloud that led them, in addition, of course, to this cloud. And it's also interesting when you look at the Torah, Vayikra, in the beginning, where it comes right after Eile Pekudei, he talks about the flow, literally the progressive flow from the end of Pekudei into Vayikra, because Vayikra al Moshe goes right after that the cloud was below. Moshe entered when the cloud was there. So he explains what that means. That when the cloud was there, Moshe knew the Shechina was present, that he was able to enter and have an engagement with the Eibishter. Very interesting how he explains the flow there. The Rebbe cites in a number of places in the Sichos, especially in the later years, Memtes, Menun. So if you want to look up more, I would suggest that. Okay. Let's now move also. So we're also going from the three Parshas we read already, Parshas Shkol in the beginning of Adar, Shabbos Mevarchim Adar, followed later by Parshas Zocher, the Shabbos before Purim, about Amalek, and then Parsha Parah yesterday, and then followed next Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh. So we discussed the order since we're still coming from Parsha Parah. So let me talk about a few questions that were asked. How does Chassidus explain the Parah Adumah purifying the impurity of death, and why it impurifies the pure? As we know, it's metame, it's metayir es atome, or metame es atoher, those that worked in the Maisa Parah. So b'chlal zeis chukas atera Parsha Parah, we know is a chukah, and this is the ultimate chukah. So it's a super rational mitzvah, not a mitzvah that you can explain simply. It's Hashem said this is the way that a red heifer, and you bring it and you offer it, and you mix the ashes of the offering together with mayim chaim, living water, living wellspring, then you're able to, and then sprinkle that on a person that was impurified by the toxins of death, that purifies. So it's exeris hakosov. And yet Chassidus explains, look in the Maimorim of Chukas, where Parsha Parah is described, is discussed in Likutei Torah, and he explains, because it's the combination of Rotze and Shuv. Eish and Mayim, Eish is Gevura, is Rotze, which the fire rises, and Mayim is Yedid Megavoy Lenomach, from higher to lower. It's Shuv. Rotze v'Shuv is the formula of life. All of life requires pulsating energy. Rotze v'Shuv. V'achayis Rotze v'Shuv. Like the heartbeat, which is a contraction and expansion. Rotze v'Shuv, a tension and a resolution. The breath, exhale, inhale. So Merum is in that. It's still exeris hakosov. But then you can start understanding, you want to purify from death, which separated and body and soul, and disconnected the body from the source of life. The way to do it is to re-engage with Rotze and Shuv and Elokus. Same thing, you want energy, divine energy, you have to have a Rotze and a Shuv. And that's what the Eish and Mayim represent. And there's also explanations on why Parah Adumah, why a red heifer, etc. So you could all look up in the Mayim and Likutei Torah, Chukas, where he talks about this. And speaks also in Aveda, that the Parah Adumah represents Nefesh Habamis, the animal soul, that you bring as an offering. And you don't destroy, and even though you offer the fat and the blood, but there still remains Efer, which is the ash that remains. And he said that's the Koyach HaMesaveh, that the animal soul has a power of desire. What you burn out is the object of desire. That you eliminate. But the power of desire is Yisedosi Bahar Kedesh, she says in that Maimer. It's rooted in the highest levels. And you want to harness that power of desire toward an object of desire that's of Gedusha. So that's the Aveda of the Parah Adumah, as he explains there more at length. Now, why is it impurify the pure? So it's an interesting concept, because let's go back to what Tumas Mes is. Tumas Mes is, for a moment, it's Atem Adveikim B'Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kol Chamayim. When you're connected to the source of life, you live. Death represents, after Chetei Tzadas, they disconnected. You disconnect from the source of life, there's going to be a disconnect. Yes, we believe in Tchis HaMesim, it will be repaired. But meanwhile, even for a second, Rega Kot Nazavticha, even a second, there's a schism, a rupture, as we call it, like a tzimtzum. So this is an intense thing, because it represents, Chetei Tzadas, represents all forms of disconnect, of dissonance between the divine and existence. So yes, we have a way of purifying, Parah Adumah, but because it's not yet the Geula, it comes with a price, that the one who's working on it, in a way, assumes personally that he becomes impure in the process. Because we haven't yet corrected the Chetei Tzadas. We haven't corrected the thing of mess, period. For temporarily, for this person, he's purified. So the Kohen, who works in the Maisa HaPorah, not actually the one that offers it, but the one who works in it, becomes Tomei. He assumes it until Mashiach comes, when everyone will be purified. There'll be Ruach HaTumah Avim in Ha'aretz. There'll be the removal of all forms of impurities, including the impurity of this dissonance and disconnect. Similar to what the Alter Rebbe says in a Maimah that the Tzemach Tzedek explains in Derech Mitzvosecha, the Isur of bringing a korban by a Kohen that's a Baal Mum, that in some ways handicapped, or has some defect, and he asks a similar question, and he says, because the defect reflects the imperfection of existence, and there's some that still have to carry that as like a kapara for the rest of the world. He gives an example there from a battle, that there's a tachsisi milchama, there's a military strategy. In order to draw out the enemy, you don't know where they are, you send out someone into the open, put him in danger. But as a result, the enemy exposes themselves because they shoot at him or they come to try to grab him. So he may fall and he may be a casualty, but as a result of him, they can win the bigger battle. So he explains that the Balmum is the fact that there's some that still carry, they're sensitive souls that carry some imperfection in order to protect everybody else. When Mashiach comes, obviously all this will be repaired and transformed, but it's a tremendous Chassidus nefesh that a person is carrying that so-called imperfection of the world that's still there. We say this about Mashiach as well in the Gemara, that he carries chaloyim, the illnesses and the problems of his generation, that the Mashiach will carry it because that's what a Rebbe is, like the story of the Mittler Rebbe, that he had to find within himself, the dakas at least, somewhere subtly, a flaw that somebody had in order to be able to repair it in himself, then he could help repair it in another. Okay. So in this context, someone asked the question, what is the source of your explanation on the progression of the 4 chapters? So last week, Rabbi Jacobson, I've been enjoying your MyLife program. Thank you for all the work you put into it. On episode 537, that was last week, around the 48-minute mark, you mentioned a teaching from the Rebbe about the Hirah from the flow of the Arba Parshios. Can you share the source for this teaching? So there, I spoke about the order, starting from Parshas Shkolim to Zocher to Parah to HaChodesh. So the actual source, I remember the Rebbe saying it in the Fabrengen. I don't remember which Fabrengen right now, where he did speak all 4. But overall, I did combine from several sichos. There are places where the Rebbe in volume in Chelik Yud Beis in Likutei Sichos, I think, could be Tzav maybe, but he talks about the connection Parah and HaChodesh, because interestingly, HaChodesh was said Rosh Chodesh Nissan. Parah was brought on the 2nd day of Nissan, and yet the order is first Parah and then HaChodesh. So the Gemara says the reason, because first you need Tara before you bring the Commemorate Pesach, that is. That's talked about in Parshas HaChodesh. So the Rebbe speaks about the Avodah of that order. First Tara and then HaChodesh. But the other 2, he speaks in different sichos, in Likutei Sichos especially, and in a number of years, and I just combined quite a few of them. So I can't point to one, even though I want to find that one where the Rebbe spoke all 4. Maybe somebody could help me. I did mention Parshat Truma Tov Shemem, where he spoke about the Parshas Hafsokah. So if anybody has more information, please, always love to hear from you. See this as a collaborative partnership, and I'll be happy to share what I find. Okay. Now this coming Shabbos is Parshas HaChodesh, and it goes right actually into Rosh Chodesh. Will be next Sunday. Will be Rosh Chodesh Nissan. So let us discuss some elements of that. Let me just see. Okay. How do we apply Parshas HaChodesh to our lives today? So first, what does a Zak Parsha talk about? As the name implies, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. We're coming out to the end of a long, arduous, and painful genocidal Golus, Mitzrayim. And Hashem is finally, it's after the 10 Makis, and Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu where in Mitzrayim, and says to him, look up into heaven. Points up to the heavens of Egypt. And look at the moon. There's a discussion that Agar, what did he see? It was a new moon. But regardless, Chodesh Hazeh Lachem. It's the first time he's told the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. That Rashi even says in the beginning of Chumash that this is the first mitzvah. Even though you could say there's mitzvahs B'ris Milah in Parshas Lech Lecha, but bottom line is, it's the first mitzvah. Not yet Matan Torah, but it's, and the Mefarshim talk about that. Chodesh Hazeh Lachem. That this is the month to you, that you will count by the months, meaning the lunar calendar will be your calendar. This is the first time we're told this. And as this new moon is renewed and reborn, so too the people will be renewed. And that's why Chodesh is called Chodesh from the word Chidush, new moon. And 2 weeks from now will be the full moon, and that's when that's when they will march out of Mitzrayim. So it's the beginning of the Geula. And indeed, ever since, we're Mekadosh the Levana every month. Kiddush Levana, we sanctify the moon. That the Jewish people will be renewed like the moon is renewed. And we indeed are Daimim Levana, we're similar to the moon. Moinim Levana, we counter the moon. How are we similar? Because the Jewish people, the same thing, wax and wane. The sun is a very consistent light. It's compared to Umas Elam, actually, the nations of the world. The moon, wax and wane, there's ups and downs. It's always moving. So first there is a full moon, then it starts waning, becomes a third quarter, a smaller moon, till there's a complete, the moon disappears. And just about when it disappears, to be reborn again. A quarter, and then a full moon again. And the moon represents, in mystical terms, in Kabbalah, Chassidus, many, many levels of Aliyas HaMalchus and Yeridus HaMalchus, until Kaimasira Bashlamusa is the full moon. A lot of discussion on this, and many Maimorim, especially the Maimorim of Mocha Chedesh, also Chele Gimel and Hepshachayim Beis, a big arichus about the Levana. And ultimately the Levana will become even greater than the Shemesh, the Mashpia Malchus, Elias HaMalchus, all the way to Atik, all the way to Atzmus. So it all begins in Parshas HaChedesh. So it's understandable. Coming out of Mitzrayim was not just a technical thing, it was a renewal. The Jewish people would become a new nation. Goy Bekerev Goy. An Am Yisrael that would be ready to go receive the Torah by Matan Torah. So the lesson to us is very clear. It's about renewal. No matter what happens in life, you look at the moon, you right away have a lesson. No matter what happens, there will always be a renewal, a rebirth. That's what the Levana teaches us. And that's the way we understand it. So even when we're in our own Golos Mitzrayim, Mitzarim v'Gvulim, everybody has their limitations and their constraints and their fears and insecurities and inhibitions. You fill in the blanks of what Mitzrayim means in your life. Know that Hashem will speak to you in Rosh Chodesh Nissan, and He tells you, HaChedesh hazeh lachem. Here, this is lachem, the primiuscham, this was given to you, the moon within you, and just as the moon is renewed, you will be renewed. But you have to be ready for it. You have to make a keli for it, which goes on to speak about Purim and Pesach and all the details. So they all are here, Baruchnius, in our lives, as we prepare for renewal. So every year, Yitzis Mitzrayim, B'chol Deir V'Deir Chayiv Adam Lidas Asas Mekilu Yatzma Mitzrayim, every generation, and the Alter Rebbe reads every day, adds every day we have to see ourselves as if we leave Mitzrayim. What does that mean? Not physical Egypt, the Mitzrayim V'Gvulim of our lives. But that includes also that every day there's also, and every generation is Chodesh hazeh lachem, a renewal that it all begins with. And that prepares us, and that in a sense helps us enter into the Chodesh HaGeula, as the Medrash says, that up till that point, when the Eibishter created the world, He established the months and the years calendar. The lunar calendar was established, Chodesh Nissan would become Chodesh HaRishon. Rishon hu lachem l'chadshei hashana, as he continues in the pasuk. This is the Chodesh shel Geula, because the moon represents redemption, whereas the rest of the months of the year are, yes, they all have an element of Chidush every month, but the month of Geula is, we see, it's Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim. Like we say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, by the Aseret Sadibris, Asher Yitzisichem Eretz Mitzrayim. Not Asher Barasi Hashemayim V'Aretz. Creation seems to be bigger than that. But creation, of course God creates, but to be able to exist in creation with its Simtsumim and the Mitzarim V'Gvulim, and then Tzisichem Eretz Mitzrayim, in a world of Mitzarim V'Gvulim we can find redemption, that's Chodesh HaGeula. And that's a Bochele Bonov, Yaakov Bonov, Bechira of Eden, Bonov Acharta, which happened, it says Mitzrayim and by Matan Torah, that it would lead up to. Be'etziachas Omer Mitzrayim, Tavnis Alekim Alahor Azeh. The whole point of Yitzis Mitzrayim was to come serve Hashem by this mountain called Har Sinai, when they received the Torah 50 days after they left Mitzrayim. So how do we apply Parsha Chodesh to our lives? Personally, collectively, things going on at Yisrael now can sometimes feel very overwhelming and foreboding. But we have to know, Achedesh Azalachem. Look up to the sky, the same moon that Moshe saw 3,337 years ago. Yeah. Is the year 2448. Is the same moon we see now. The same moon hovering over Gaza, hovering over Eretz Yisrael, hovering over all the world. So its lesson to us is very clear, the renewal of the moon. Okay, a few more questions around this. Why is the period around Purim and Pesach connected to the obliteration of Amalek? So, of course, I am assuming the writer is referring to number one, Zocher, Parsha Zocher, Asher Oselecha Amalek. So it says, Mochi Timcha Zecher Amalek, to erase and obliterate Amalek. Before Purim, we read it. And on Purim, of course, Haman Agogi, erasing Haman. Pesach, I'm not sure what you mean, probably, unless something else you're referring to. Pesach, we know that the first time Amalek attacked the Yidden was when they came out of Mitzrayim. They attacked especially the weaker ones. And that's when we're told, Zocher. What Amalek? Zocher Shoslecha Amalek when you left Mitzrayim. So in Avedis Adam, the reason is simply because Amalek is the antithesis, the alter ego, if you wish, of everything that Yitzis Mitzrayim, that Purim and Yitzis Mitzrayim represent, Geula. They both represent Geula of the Eibishter freeing us, whether it's B'derech HaTeva and Purim or B'mayla B'derech HaTeva and Pesach. And Amalek is Gematria Sofik, throws in doubts. Don't be so nispal, throws in kaltkeit, Asher Korcha B'derech Kriris. So you have to right away, Bavon, when all these things are happening, it's so easy to start dismissing it. Natural events, it happens all the time, or don't make such a big fuss about it, it's going to pass. So to maintain the passion, to maintain this inspiration of these powerful days, Mismar Gula L'Gula, from Purim to Pesach, we're reminded of Amalek. Amalek represents, like Haman, the world that tries to cool off and not allow us to have the passionate connection we need to have with the divine, godliness. Okay, now we're dealing with Chodesh Nissan Pesach. So the next question is, do we commemorate the erection of the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nissan? Or someone put it, the Torah says the Mishkan was finished being built and ready for action on the first day of Nissan. Do we do anything special on Rosh Chodesh Nissan to commemorate this anniversary? So I must say, I did do some research. I did not find, besides what we do regular Rosh Chodesh, which are things that there, of course, we say Hallel and Rosh Chodesh is you have Tfilas Musaf, and women are more sensitive about working. I mean, there are things, but that's all Rosh Chodesh. Something Rosh Chodesh Nissan, besides the beginning of saying the Nasi, which is not necessarily connected. Well, you could say it's connected because the Nisim began to dedicate the Mishkan. So we do say the Nasi, so that would be a connection. But I've not found anything else in addition. It also says, Eser HaTorahs, 10 things, 10 crowns were crowned on Rosh Chodesh Nissan. So we know about this, and in Ruchnis you definitely can find lessons from all of this, like we spoke earlier about building the Mishkan within yourself. But if somebody has more information on this, I welcome you to share, and I'll share it with the public. Okay. Another question is, why are we not told to increase in joy in the month of Nisan? I understand that we are told by the Gemara to increase in joy in Adar because of the great miracles Hashem did to save us. But why doesn't it also say to increase in joy in Nisan because Hashem saved us from slavery? Is it because the commemoration of going out of slavery needs to be done with different energies and faculties other than the energy of joy? Okay. I've not heard that question before, but firstly, just remember, joy, Ivdus Hashem b'simcha and Tev Lev Mishta Tamid is a mitzvah tmidis. You're supposed to always be joyous. So even though there are times in the year where you say Zman Simcha Seinu on Sukkos, but all Yomim Tevim are Moyedim l'Simcha. They're all Simcha, including Pesach. Now Purim, as a special Simcha, Simcha Adar Leyoda, and the Megillah says, and that's why it's a month that was transformed from mamish the opposite to light. So the whole month becomes a month of increased joy. This doesn't mean in Nisan we shouldn't have joy. It's the Chodesh HaGeula, it's called, the month of redemption. But everyone has its kav. The main kav of Pesach is Man Cherosenu, freedom, transcendence. Obviously there's joy in that. Like I said, there's joy in Shavuos and joy in Pesach, even though we say joy, Zman Simchasenu, special joy Sukkos. As the Rebbe explains, each Yom Tov has all the other Yom Tovim within them. But then there's the mitzvah, the Hava Beit Fei, the Shar, the gate through which all others elevate. So even when you're doing a specific mitzvah, all the mitzvahs are there, but there's the focus, the emphasis is on that. Purim emphasizes especially his hapcha. So even though you could say Mitzrayim was also, they lived in a terrible slavery, but the transformation of a gzeira, that one day he was going to kill all the Jews, and then it turned into killing all the enemies. And the Jews had Yehudim Simcha V'Sasim Yikar has a particular simcha in that. The simcha of Ishapcha, of transformation, darkness to light. Again, this doesn't take away that Mitzvah Mitzrayim also has an element of that, but not quite with that same emphasis. Next question. How do we prepare for Pesach 30 days before the holiday? So it says, Shleishim Yom Kedem Achag, you prepare for the holiday. The Rebbe has said many times that 30 days before the holiday, we should start preparing for the holiday. I mean, it's halacha. Since Pesach is the time our ancestors were freed from slavery before they left Egypt, they spent time preparing to leave. What are some things our ancestors did to prepare for Pesach that we can emulate today, so that when Pesach comes, we are completely ready? So I think everybody knows, any Jewish home preparing for Pesach knows you don't prepare a day before. And very many, it starts even before 30 days. The cleaning of the home, the baking of matzahs. Just in general, preparing Pesach, people prepare, buying new clothing, children learning about the Seder. And of course, the halachas, we start learning the halachas of Pesach, especially Shleishim Yom Kedem Achag. And this does emulate when the Jews were told. Well, they were told, okay, 2 weeks. Remember, there's, according to some opinions, it's 2 weeks before Pesach. Some opinions Shleishim Yom. So 2 weeks is when Moshe is told Achedesh Hazel Lachem. So anything, Kedusha Boy Hachana is an expression. Anything that is valuable, Dover Choshev, you need preparation for. Misha Torah be'erev Shabbos, Yechel b'Shabbos. Someone who works, toils, erev Shabbos will have what to eat on Shabbos. And simply put, if you have a special meeting, you have to meet someone havdil in business. You don't just run in. You prepare a presentation. You prepare what you're going to say. And the better you prepare, the better the audience will be, the better the experience will be. The same thing is here. Pesach is a tremendous yom tov of freedom. But the more you prepare, obviously the day itself of Pesach has special powers. But the more you're ready for it, the more you're acclimated, the more you sanctify yourself and prepare, the better it is. Shleishim Yom is a particular 30 days, is a full cycle of a month. So actually begins on Purim. It's 30 days before Pesach. Tezvav Adar. It's 30 days before Yudalad Adar even. It's 30 days before Yudalad Nissan. Now that's Ugashmi somewhat. And Beruchnius, you prepare Beruchni spiritually. Like the month of Elul is also 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. And how do you prepare spiritually? You learn Chassidus. You learn the Maimonim about Pesach. So you're setting your mind, your mindset, your heart set, your soul set, all toward the spirit and the energy of Pesach, of Zman Cherosenu. And the more you do that, the more Pesach will have its impact on you, because you're making a keli for it. Do our sages guarantee that the redemption will come in Nissan? So someone asks it this way. Is there a guarantee from Chazal that the final redemption must occur during the month of Nissan? So we have a few Maimar Chazal. There's a Maimar Chazal that says, "B'Nissan nigalu, b'Nissan asidin ligad." The Jews came out in Nissan, Mitzrayim, and in the future they'll come out. Kimet seischem eretz Mitzrayim aren and floys. The future, the final redemption, is compared in many ways to the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the redemption from Pesach, which is why the Seder we talk, especially the first half of the Seder, is more about going out of Egypt. The second half is more about the Geula Asida. So there's these two sides of it. In addition, it says There's two opinions when will be the Geula. B'Nisan Nigalu, some say B'Tishrei, but the opinion of B'Nisan Nigalu is the halacha, as the Tzemach Tzedek brings, and other places. So you have that, it's called Chodesh HaGeula. That's why Chodesh Nissan is called Chodesh HaGeula. So this is Chazal speaking to us, and guarantee it's a promise from Hashem. Now, you could say, why didn't it happen till now? I don't have an answer for that. So, guarantee is a very big word. There is a guarantee Mashiach will come. We're told Benissen is the Eisratz, and can Mashiach come in the month of Iyar or the month of Adar? Yes. And we want him to come as soon as possible. So B'Mela and Nissen will already be the Geula, similar to what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. When you say L'shana Abba B'Yerushalayim, it means he comes now, but Mela L'shana Abba, the next year will be already Yerushalayim. But it's up to also Maseinu B'Avedesenu, our work, and the Rebbe says, Tut Altvasir can do everything you can. And he actually said that in the month of Nisan, Chof Ches Nisan, Tov Shenun Aleph, 34 years ago. So in that spirit, we have also another Maimar Chazal. It says, Moshe is Goel Rishon hu Goel Achrin. So someone asks, how do we understand the teaching that Moshe was the first Redeemer and will be the last Redeemer? If unfortunately Moshe passed away 3,000 years ago, does it mean that final Redeemer Mashiach will have the same qualities as Moshe and be a strong leader while also having the proper amount of humility? Yes, that's part of it. So the question is asked and even more strengthened by the fact that Moshe came from Shevet Levi. Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. David is from the Chodesh, from the Shevet Yehuda. So number one, it's a Ruchnisdik, I think. The Goel has a particular neshama that has the power to lead the Yidden out of Geula, out of Golos. And Golos Mitzrayim, a similarity to our Golos. Gulas Mitzrayim, like Kimet Seischem Eretz Mitzrayim Aren and Flois, Benissen Nigalu, Benissen Asidin Li Goel. So there's a similarity, the energy of Goel. So you say Moshe, Goel Rishon, Hu Goel Achrin, you mean the spirit of the Goel within Moshe will also be the spirit within Mashiach. And there are more explanations given as well. There's a Sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Tofrei Sadik Test, the Rebbe explains it in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Aleph in the beginning, Ad Sheyovei Shiloh, talks about this as well for more discussion on this matter. Bottom line is there is a connection between both of them, Moshe and Mashiach, and with the connection of the Geula that each of them will bring. So of course the Geula Amitis Vashlema being the complete Geula and permanent one. But it comes with Koyach of Yitzis Mitzrayim, the Koyach of Moshe that led the Jews out of Mitzrayim. And finally, is there a finally? Let me see. We'll leave this for next week. We still have time to speak about Pesach messages. I'll leave this next one for Pesach. But now we're going to go to some more timely matters, and to just round out this program. So the first question somebody asked: would the Rebbe oppose? And this you have to make a little hefsek ben parsha leparsha because like really somewhat jolting. Would the Rebbe oppose the dismantling of the Department of Education? As a song wrote it out, I know the Rebbe was very instrumental in the founding of the Department of Education. That was in 1979 under President Carter, in order that education numerical, not sure what you mean, education would be more focused on building a moral character of the student. It would seem that the opposite was accomplished by the past many years, and now President Trump is intent on getting rid of it as much as you can and passing it on to the states. Is this something the Rebbe would approve of? So to go back to 1979, which interestingly, remember in 1977, Tov Shin Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe called Shnas HaChinuch, education, a year of education, which was also when Mivtza Chinuch came out. And then a little while later, they started establishing, I don't remember what year it was exactly, but in those years, Education Day, Yud Aleph Nisan. Now, education by the Rebbe means more than just technical education. It means exactly that, teaching children. There's an ayin re'eh, ve'ezon shamaz. There's an eye that sees, and there's an ear that hears. Accountability, as we spoke about before. To shape the moral and spiritual character, the moral character of every child, based on Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. So the Rebbe saw Department of Education, a federal department, that is putting an emphasis on the importance of education, which would, the Rebbe's hope, to develop that spirit throughout the country, to teach children that the message of life, not just how to make a living, but not to live in a jungle, as the Rebbe would put it, a life of accountability, of nobility, of civility, of goodness and kindness. Tzedek v'yesher, the Rebbe's words. The essence of all the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Neach. So now, what would the Rebbe say now? Now, none of us can guess what the Rebbe would say. My inclination is that the Rebbe would not come out necessarily and oppose it. Because it was not the Rebbe's style to oppose unless it was something that was a blatant hepech halacha, where the Rebbe spoke, let's say, about the returning land for peace in Eretz Yisrael, the Shtachim, or Mi Yehudi. But I don't think there's a precedent where the Rebbe came out against a governmental decision. The Rebbe may, and this is complete speculation, may have spoken about education being important. So if they said, let's cut out God from education, the Rebbe would speak about that. But this seems to be more of a political question, first of all, whether the Department of Education is being effective. I don't think the Rebbe would weigh in on that. The Rebbe would weigh in on the importance of emphasizing education, the federal government. But remember, the federal government does fund, and want to pass this on to the states. So I cannot say, if I had to guess, I don't think the Rebbe would speak about it. That's definitely not in public. But again, it's a guess. I may be wrong. And I say that openly. Because to me, it's not a question here about the importance of it. Now, the Rebbe hoped and wanted that the Department of Education should do its job. But if the government would say to the Rebbe, let's say they discussed it with him, it's not doing his job, it's just wasting money, and we have another way to do the same thing in a better way, I don't think the Rebbe would necessarily argue with that, because the Rebbe did not get into the bureaucracy of it, of how to do it. So that's what I would think would be the approach. So nothing changes. The Rebbe's focus on the importance of education of children remains, with all its emphasis. Maybe the Rebbe would encourage, can you get the federal government to make focus like that? Or it may not be so simple. Like, for example, if they put emphasis on getting a moment of silence in all the schools. But can the federal government even do that? I don't know. Maybe that is a local and a state decision more than a federal decision. So that's its own discussion. So that's my response to that. So it's not a change in Shitta here. It's a question of more technicality. And again, taking the precedent that the Rebbe did not come out in general and state something unless he saw it absolutely as a problem, get involved in governmental decisions of a president or Congress and so on. And remember, Congress has, of course, they're the ones that established it. They're the ones that have to dismantle it. So the story is not over yet as well. Just keep that in mind. Next question. Is it appropriate for rabbis to post political clickbait videos just to increase their views? So I wrote here, it says rabbis, but the question came in not just about rabbis, but actually about shluchim. So let me read the question in full. Here's how somebody posed the question. Thank you for all you do on behalf of the Jewish people. May you continue to do so for many happy and healthy years to come. I was wondering what you have to say on the recent trend of shluchim posting political clickbait videos on YouTube. Often there's no Jewish content, and it would appear these videos purely serve to offer political commentary and increase the views and reach of the shliach, but not as a result of them being a Torah teacher. There was a recent article posted about the phenomenon on a Chabad news outlet, and they sent me a link. I look forward to hearing your response. Well, being someone that does many videos and on many topics, yes, I would say our job, as I mentioned before, is to be the Rebbe's mouthpiece. And whatever the Rebbe would say, that's what we should be saying. So obviously, just political opinions, just to get attention or for sensational reasons or to get views, that's not the job. B'chlal of a Yid, b'frat shliach, shluch shlon kamese. So if there's something you hear someone said and you can take a lesson in that in Avodas Hashem to help you futza ma'nesecha chutza, okay, I do that. Sometimes I hear someone say something and I may comment on it. but with a takeaway message, not just some political commentary. That's not our job. You want to be a political commentator, it's a different career. I'm not here to criticize, but since the question is asked, that's how I would respond to that. But I also don't want to get into people's heads. I don't know what people's intentions are. Is it just views? Maybe they feel they are in some way bringing a Torah view in the matter. So I can then look at it case by case, seeing each message. To just blanket say that every person who's made a video on a political thing is completely just for external reasons and not for any content. You can't say that, because maybe there are very good messages. But overall, in the context of what you're asking, that's how I would respond. Another, I guess, controversial one is, should we participate and vote in the upcoming World Zionist Congress election? So every 5 years this election, recently it's become, I remember 5 years ago I already was invited myself, it's become, because there's a lot of money being raised in the United States, we're talking about the billions, $1 billion, $2 billion, $2.5 billion. So there's all kinds of slates that are making the case that if you support us, we'll be able to direct the money to causes that you believe in, instead of causes that are being used for other purposes. So, talking this program is MyLife Chassidus Applied. So, though I'm not speaking on behalf, I'm not a spokesman for Chabad, I'm not a spokesman, but basically, from the Rebbe's point of view, generally speaking, no, we don't get involved in elections formally as Chabad, just because there's money. That's not enough reason. Especially something that's associated with something that may not be exactly aligned with Chabad's thinking, whether it's the Zionist, secular Zionist movement, and all that represents. Even though there are religious Zionists, obviously, and we know there are religious Zionist parties, but Chabad has not been involved with that. Now, what you do individually as a yochid, individually you can do whatever you want. You can vote for whoever you like, and so on. But as a Chabad official thing, I would say nobody has the authority to do that. Only the Rebbe could say that, and the Rebbe would, I'm pretty confident to say that the Rebbe would not say that any Chabad should formally be involved. Now, if you know people and you feel that you can have influence, and money can be directed toward good causes, and you have a way of doing that, it's a whole different discussion. That's more of an individual discussion, not a Chabad discussion, and everybody has to make that decision individually and personally. Like in many decisions you make that are not necessarily Chabad decision, which store to buy from. If you see a store that supports causes you like, by all means. But that doesn't mean you're endorsing it formally and officially in the name of any particular Jewish movement, including Chabad. That would be the response to that. And finally, just to conclude with a thank you that someone wrote to me, so I think it's a nice way to conclude this program, and that is, thank you. Everyone has their own things in their life that bring them joy. Some people like music, some people like riding a bicycle. One of my favorite ways to have joy is learning Chassidus, especially a mimer that opens with some questions, and at the end of the mimer, when all the answers are given and everything is tied together, and I understand it, I have great joy. So I'm sending you this note to say thank you for all the amazing Chassidus classes you give online. It's greatly appreciated. I'm a truck driver, and often I listen to your classes while I'm driving at work. And it brings me extra joy because not only do I get to hear Chassidus a few hours a day, but it's while I'm at work, so I'm getting paid at the same time. Ha ha. May Hashem bless you and your family to have 1,000 times the amount of joy that you inspire in the community with these great classes. I just want to say thank you so much. I hope it should not compromise your work. On the contrary, it should only enhance it. And Mevorach Mizborach, those that bless are blessed. You should be blessed many times over, as well as all the listeners, everyone involved in this program. Good time as we go into Chodesh Nissan. It should be a very kosher and freilich and Pesach. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. And yes, it should be a Simcha Dika, Lebedika, end of Chodesh Adar, going into Mismar Gula, the Gula of Chodesh Agula, of Nissan, Ben Nissan, Nigalu, Ben Nissan, Asidin Ligoil. The future, the Mashiach should come already now, so B'meila and Nissan will already have the Gula with all the brachas that come with it. And I thank you so much again for listening. Thank you for your questions. And we should only have Yidden everywhere, especially in Eretz Yisrael, should only have Menuchas HaNefesh, Menuchas HaGuf, peace, return of the hostages, Let's finish the job of Mochi Timche Zecher Amalek, and then you can go the Minei Melech of Mashiach and the Binyan Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. Be well, everybody. Call Tov.
This program is brought to you by MyLife Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.